So welcome back. I hope you're full of energy again. We have some more work coming up. Before that we have also some more explanations. So already I think all the groups now came to me and asked, okay, what about these microtrends? Well, good question. This is what's coming up right now. What do we do with microtrends and how do we plan our innovation then in more detail? Something we're going to discuss here. And we're also going to discuss in general what is the function of working with trends. I had also the question, okay, what are we doing here actually? Is it risk assessment or is it innovation or what do we do with trends? Well, the short answer, you can do many different things with trends, but we're going to see more concretely now what you and your situation as entrepreneurs can do with it and what large companies do with it, which have more the necessity to sustain a competitive advantage over time, for instance, and think about, okay, is part of my overall business now threatened and do I need to move into a different field of operations or what do I do? Now, first of all, the trend analysis and the trend extrapolation is mostly on identifying changes in a quantitative way. So you really look into things which happen over a long time. We had the megatrend, for instance, of the demographic change, which you can track. You can see how many people are being born. By that you also have quite a lot of predetermination, because when you know how many people are being born today, you also know how many people are approximately going to live in 30 years, 40 years, 50 years from now on, because most likely most of these people will still be alive by then. So we have a couple of trends where we can utilize also statistical means to go into. And what you saw in the trend database is also these little insights, is really these just more qualitative insights of what a particular company is doing, what a particular consumer group is maybe after, how consumer behavior is changing, and that is then more qualitative activities. So it's not only up there, it's also down in the qualitative arena. Now, what is a trend and why is a trend important? Well, what we see up here is sort of the 3 steps of how a trend comes into being and how you can also detect it. Very early on, you only have a lot of weak signals. A weak signal is a term being created by Igor Anzov, who says that every strategic change or major change is announced by these so-called weak signals, by something you can perceive today and that tomorrow then will have an impact. So how do we find these weak signals? Well, it's very difficult because you don't really know what you're looking for in such a search. It could be almost anything. You could see people starting to wear maybe one leg of their trouser further up, and you think, oh, that's a trend, so we should start producing maybe trousers which have one short leg and one long leg. Then it turns out it's only a subculture of a certain type of people who like a certain type of music. So it's not a trend which will be for the mass market. What I try to depict here a little bit is how the trend of the so-called LOHAS, the trend of lifestyle, of health and sustainability, could have been tracked a couple of years ago. Well, first of all, we see always that certain people who are kind of trend setters eventually behave already differently very early on. So for instance, a long time ago you could already see people who of course do sports to stay fit. If you go back 30 years and you would say, well, I'm going for a run every morning, probably you wouldn't have many friends to do that. Nowadays you need to enlist in the major marathons already in the first day after the inscription opens to still get a place. So it really became this mass phenomenon, while 30 years back, I mean, it was probably even more sexy to have a bit more kilos with you, etc. And there were even way back already people who tried to live in the way that they're not damaging the environment at all. Even 30 years back you had people who were kind of trying to wash their clothes without a washing machine, and particularly not using a lot of detergent and so on. So trying to not damage it all. And this kind of weird behavior can be a weak signal, but it can be also just weird behavior, which will always stay weird behavior. So this is what makes trend research always difficult, and which makes it also impossible to predict as such. It's only that you get signs and you get more and more certain that things come into life, but it's not that like futurists like to do that, tell you, well, here's the 10 things which we're going to see in 10 years. That is actually something nobody can predict, but you can prepare for multiple options in the future. Well, to see that it becomes a bit more serious, what we see up here, is of course that today you see energy companies, for instance, offering electricity, which is still the same electricity, which will do exactly the same thing to power your TV, but where you pay twice as much for it, which doesn't seem to make much sense from an ecological point of view, but then it's all a question of having another value attached to it. So people buy green energy because they think by that they can save the planet, or at least they can do something to preserve the climate as we have it today in a better way. So this is something, if it's now already a product out there, then it starts becoming a trend, because there's more and more people actually really putting money behind their words, so to speak. We had talking about green activities for a long time, but now it's really people putting decent money behind it. A little bit of a fun thing is also when George W. Bush was starting to run publicly, so to speak. So there was a big media event also, George W. Bush starting to run, etc., etc. And of course, that was not because he liked to see himself in running shorts, because he also didn't look particularly good in them. But what do you think, why does a president of a big country openly says, I'm the guy who's going running 3 times a week? What is the reason behind that?
To stop the obesity.
What's that?
To stop the obesity in the US.
To stop the obesity? Absolutely. What is the problem with obesity, so with people being overweight? Health problems, and with these health problems, of course, also real financial strain on the budget. So that was the primary reason. Probably not to be re-elected, because he did not necessarily make a very good impression, but he made the impression that he is somebody who also will do something about it, and will not accept to sort of become more and more unhealthy while he grows old. So of course we see here both a trend and of course a response also to a trend, because the trend to obesity, which was one which could be seen and be tracked over a long period of time, and which, if you anticipate how that is going to end, with more and more strain on the healthcare systems in the US and more people not being able to sustain their health, and then becoming unable to work earlier on and so on, that spells a lot of economical problems as well. And it's of course then also the response to the trend by saying, well, we need to move our people into a different direction and promote to stay healthier. Now, of course, it's also a huge market. We have this whole market of wellness, people actually caring for their health, going to certain kinds of holidays where they not, as it used to be, find a nice beach and then be out there either sunbathing for too long until they're really red, and then later on drinking until late at night to become even more red in the face. But they might actually be out there and living only on healthy food and water and hiking the whole day. All of that is shifting also the way different markets work, the tourist market for one, but what we see here also is that we have also changes in the way how we build our infrastructure, how we build houses, as new types of energy efficient housing, but there's also a lot of energy saving mechanisms which have basically created a totally new market. And of course, ideally, everything we do here today and everything you're going to do in the future with trends should enable you to anticipate to a certain extent what kind of markets we're going to see in the future. Now, how do we do that? Well, we go into all kinds of resources on trends and where trends are being identified. You also have these top 10 innovations, which is also somebody who is trying to predict what the top 10 innovations are out there. Now, if I would be absolutely certain that this is the top 10 innovations, then I wouldn't publish about them and then I wouldn't put them on a large board. I would rather go out there, found a company and make a lot of money by that because I'm the only one who knows rather than spreading the word. So we also need to be careful, of course, what the so-called futurists or gurus tell you about the future, because if they would know for certain that something is happening, then they would exploit it rather commercially and not by giving speeches, but rather by actually economic activity. So still, a trend databases can give you some help because they allow you to look for certain areas of changes. If you're, for instance, a technology-driven company, you might not have much insight into consumer behavior and what is changing consumer behavior. So for that, it would be very good to go to a source for trends and for trend databases to ask them and to consult a tool like we are doing today. There's many more than the one we use. There's, this is a one which is normally fee-based, but we have it open under these credentials until the end of the course, so you can continue using it at least for the course. There's also some open ones which I mentioned down here, which you can continue using without having a fee. When we talk about trends and changes in the future, there's these kind of trends where we can at least to a certain degree of certainty predict the direction of a development. And in a narrow sense, this is what we call a trend. So for instance, this demographic change, we can predict to a certain extent because we know the birth rates today, and then we know that humans cannot pop out in random numbers in the next 30 years. They must have been born at some stage. So this is something which we would then call a dynamic which is trend-like. This is taken out of a larger report of the Deutsche Bank, who tried to anticipate what the future economy is going to look like. So they had these kind of trend-like dynamics, and then they have also the uncertain dynamics, where you say, well, it can go either direction. For instance, we could have a more open society or we could have a more closed society. I think here where we are, a lot of you come from international places. They're not coming from Estonia, but of course Estonia is also a country which has in absolute living memory have seen a different system. They have seen the communist system, they have seen a transition period, and they have seen a period of prosperity here. Unlike some of the other Baltic countries, but to that matter, so you can never be sure how the political situation, for instance, is going to be in the future. Is it going to develop further to an open Western-like society, or is there going to be a backslash to more communist or socialist type of behavior? So this is why when you discuss the future, you would always try to differentiate into these two. Here we have some more examples of trend-like dynamics and uncertain developments. So political legal frameworks are often uncertain. Also value-creating patterns. I was giving a talk once at a venture capitalist gathering in Berlin, and that was in 2006, I think. And At that time, they were totally uncertain if any economic value creation can come out of web-based services. So what they were basically seeing at that time is that whenever somebody has a good idea how to create a web-based service, somebody else would just include that in some mesh-up website and depriving basically the inventor of the ability to exploit its invention. So there was a lot of uncertainty, for instance, to the ability to then really extract value out of your own invention. What is the classical way of ensuring that you can extract value out of an invention? How do you secure that it's only you who is allowed to extract money out of an invention? Patents. Or a monopoly, which can be either formed because you have maybe the access to some scarce resources and nobody else can now go into it. For instance, the steel business could be one way. You say, well, if I'm controlling at one stage all the iron ore, then nobody else will be able to enter that monopoly. You can have patents. A patent is nothing else than, by law, somebody giving you the monopoly for a certain point in time or for a certain range of years. Also with the downside that after that year, it's then totally open to everyone because you have disclosed also what you're patenting. So if it's a technology, nothing about that technology is secret anymore because you're opening that up in the patent to then ensure that it's only you who is going to be able to use that. Of course, we know that patents are also only as good as when you can enforce that somebody else is not abusing that and just using that inside information. We see a lot of patent rows between one of the main sponsors here, Samsung and Apple these days. We see a kind of revival of patenting disputes. There have been, particularly in IT, for the last 20 years, was not much happening there because basically people were sharing patents rather than enforcing patents and trying to keep people out of it. So this is something which probably 15 years ago nobody would have predicted that we're going to have this kind of patent war behavior again, but as we see today, we do have them. So if you have these two, if you have these trend-like dynamics and the uncertain dynamics, then we still don't know what can we really do to now plan our business, right? Can we only go with the trend-like dynamics, or can we go with the uncertainty as well to a certain extent? Well, first of all, the first step is normally to try to get more grasp on the trends. What all of you, I think, have been doing already is trying to filter a little bit. I had these 5 mega trends, and some of you might have felt that for their particular business they are not so appropriate, so you look maybe at the list of other mega trends to have more something which is of high relevance to your business. That is a good first step. Then you want to differentiate in some clever way if it's a trend-like dynamic or if it's an uncertain dynamic. To do that, a good approach is just to get together a team which has different backgrounds, as it could be the team around you, and do this kind of rating as we see here, where you say, well, we have the uncertainty on one axis and we have the importance on the other. And of course, you want, for the future planning of your business, you want to focus on the high importance ones, and you want to have some which are uncertain and some which are trend-like. So this is something you should also do right after in the group work. Try to differentiate that. When working particularly with technology, there are some additional challenges which I want briefly to go through. If we're talking about technologies, often in their development phase, the terminology is unclear, which means if you want to use databases to know more about the technology, you're going to have the difficulty that you will only find part of the phenomenon. For instance, when 2004 in Deutsche Telekom, we were looking very much into what is happening in these crowdsourcing, Web 2.0, and so arena. What is happening in consumer-generated content, etc. And at that time, the terminology was so unclear that we really could only work with a few of the sort of forethinkers in the field to understand the overall phenomenon. Because if you would have looked in the database, you would simply not have been able to know which kind of keywords you were supposed to put into the search. Is it Web 2.0? I think in 2004, O'Reilly was not there yet with this catchy term. But crowdsourcing was around, that you could have searched for. User-generated content was around, that you could have searched for. But this is a big problem when you try to get a good overview of what is happening in a technological field. Finding experts is also difficult. There's some ways of doing it. One is called pyramiding, where you basically start with somebody who has some knowledge in that area you're interested in, and then you ask him for somebody he thinks is an expert or somebody he looks to for guidance. And then you probably talk to that person next and see if that person is then more knowledgeable, which normally would be the case, and then that person can be asked again who he thinks is more knowledgeable than himself, and he looks for guidance, etc., until with very few steps you come to kind of the expert in the field. This is what companies normally do, because they also want to know not only the information but also the people behind the development or the invention, because that's also the person they might then want to collaborate with, or where they can source the technology, for instance. And the problem is also the non-linearity of developments. That is something which often when you read in, I don't know, the MIT technology review, for instance, something about a technology, it always sounds like you can have it tomorrow in the product you're going to buy. However, that is normally not the case. You have a certain phase where you get a maturity in research, so that you have a certain capability of a technology which you can prove which works. And then until it scales to a serial production, or where it scales to a mass market, that could be another 10 years in many technologies. And this is also why Gartner came up with what they call here the hype cycle. Who has seen the hype cycle already? No. It's something which in industry is very useful for decision making and for understanding how far you are in a certain technology field. What they propose, and it's only a model, I mean, they can't really say if the dot is here or if it's there. It's not that you have this sophisticated mathematical algorithm behind it. It's expert judgment where these dots are. But the model as such is proposing that innovation and technologies will undergo a development which starts with a kind of technology trigger. So as I said, this capability somebody was able to produce in a lab and show that this technology can be utilized for something. And then you have the peak of the inflated expectation. So by the media, by multiplying effect that somebody from you reads in the technology review from the MIT that this and that professor has shown that this works, you send it to somebody else who now doesn't know anymore where it came from, and he thinks, oh, okay, that's great. If that is something which is around the corner, I really need to prepare also all my friends for it, and then the word is continuing to spread pretty fast. And people get the impression that it's really something which is almost on the market. Maybe they're already Googling where they can buy a certain functionality in a product, while it's not there at all. It's not even close to a product yet. And when people realize that, they basically enter this valley of disillusionment. So they come to realize that, okay, I thought it's something which is so great, which will save humankind, and now I come to realize that it's not even there in products, and maybe it doesn't even work. Maybe it was just a hoax from somebody who tried to pretend it's working. And then out of that valley of disillusionment, you come to what they call here the slope of enlightenment, which means that you understand what can be done with it, that you come to understand what it's good for, but also what it's not good for. And then you might come to the plateau of productivity, where you then can really source the technology, where as a producer of certain products, you can really look for the supplier who can bring you that functionality and which you can then build into your products. So what does this Gartner hype cycle help now for a firm? Well, it's very interesting, of course, to see the expert judgment if a certain thing, and this is a bit old here, but if you look, for instance, for mobile social network at that times, they were saying, well, this is kind of still on the inflated expectations. I don't know how you would judge it today. I mean, who has a social network on their mobile today? So it's roughly 60%, I'd say. Do you think it's usable enough? Does it give you a good experience? Who thinks that this is something they get value out of? Well, that is roughly 4%. So that sounds very much like either still being somewhere here or going further down. And why do the other 56% have it installed on their mobile?
Entertainment, probably.
Entertainment. So it does do something, but it's not very useful. Yeah.
Just I am using just some time. If I have, let's say, nothing to do, then I just looking in the mobile.
So it's not creating real value, but it gives you some entertainment. It might shorten the time, at least the time which you perceive when waiting for a bus or for public transport, and somehow you can do it. Now the question is, of course, how much does it need to be added on with until it becomes productive? So just taking that sort of functionality, what would you think would be very useful if a mobile social network would be able to provide you with that additional functionality? When would it become productive for you? Or is it even difficult to think about it? Do you have, as consumers, you might actually kind of just wait that some innovator is coming with a good solution and tells you what you can do with it now. I mean, if you go on a trend database and if you look for social networks and if you look for trends, you probably come up with, for instance, functionality that you could see who of your Facebook friends is somewhere close to you. That is something which can be done only with a mobile phone, obviously, because it needs to be there, it needs to be switched on, and it needs to somehow communicate your location. So maybe it is interesting for some of you that if you are on holiday or somewhere in a city where you normally not are, that you find out that, well, in the same city there's actually a good friend of mine. We didn't communicate it in a while, but now it's funny to see that he's here and we can actually have a coffee. That could be something. It could also be that, for instance, which is also now doable today, that I'm taking out my mobile phone, I'm taking a picture of that room, and my mobile phone tells me whom of you I can find on a social network and what your name is, and if you work in an interesting company I want to come into contact with, or if you have an interesting contact I want to get in contact with, then I could just walk over to you and say, by the way, you know that and that person, and couldn't you bring me in contact with him or her? It might also be a bit scary, I agree, but it's something which is doable and which certainly would give you some kind of value added, I would assume. And this is also a little bit the way you can now work with these micro trends. If you think about your product and you think about, well, it's not so convincing as of yet. So what kind of service is, for instance, similar to what I want to do? And if you try to find that in trend databases, most likely we will come to references to other trends, which then show you what that particular other service, which is similar to your own, has done in order to have more appeal. Or you come to basically by just browsing around to come to creative ideas how to enhance your service, to make it even more interesting. It's also, who is using Spotify in this room? Okay. 5%. Who doesn't know what Spotify is? Okay, it's a streaming service. So the idea is that it's a Swedish company, and they came up with the idea that since you have more and more music that you might be interested in, and you have more and more devices on which you want to access that music, it's actually awkward to download music and have it stored somewhere. Why don't you keep it in the cloud with them, and you just get a streaming service? So essentially, you can access, I don't know, 70% of all music which is out there through Spotify. Probably not as much, but a fair share of the music which is out there, and stream it to wherever you are, provided you have an internet connection. Now, if you have such a service, you think, first of all, okay, it's great. I can look for any kind of music. However, it's also easy to get lost. It's like Alice in Wonderland. You don't know where to go first. Maybe it helps you to have, for instance, a functionality which gives you recommendations. If you're listening to one artist, that it recommends you other artists. Of course, then the question is there already technology out there who can make these kind of recommendations? Well, the business model of Amazon has been built on their ability to build a very good engine to do that, which is basically based on the understanding what other customers bought also, and by having all that data flow in. In Spotify, I think nowadays the level for many is that they can connect that with their Facebook profile. Then Spotify knows the friends of yours and will notify you when your friends have also a Spotify account. And if they do, you can also browse what they are listening to, which gives, of course, the same value which you used to have when you were just meeting in the evening, having a party, and somebody tells you about this nice new music they have seen. So that is kind of to say that if you have certain trends and they come from totally different fields, they could inspire you to innovate your own product quite nicely. And you might also come to realize that you would find interesting collaboration partners for such trends. Good, so the Gartner Hype Cycle is one. This is something I was responsible for a long time at Deutsche Telekom. This is our technology radar. What we did is basically we differentiated all our innovation activities into certain fields. The fields are the segments of that circle. And in each segment, we then differentiated the maturity level. So anything which is in the outer ring is still basic research. That is quite far away from anything which we could build into the products right now, but it's something to watch, and it's also something where you could acquire technology at a good price. Because what happens if you wait for technology to mature until market ready, it is extremely expensive, because then the owner of the respective patent, he knows exactly what you want to do with that technology, and he knows exactly what kind of market you're targeting with, so he can actually make the calculation him or herself and say, well, if you're after that market and my technology is the one enabling you to go after that market, then I want 60% of all the profit you're going to make in that market. While if it's early on and he says, well, I'm still a researcher and I'm happy if I'm able to just get some money out of my research, he might sell you the patent and everything which goes with it, the knowledge and maybe some consultancy for 200,000 euros. And then you make whatever profit you can make later on. In addition to that, we have kind of relevance, differentiation. This is also expert judgment. So to make the judgment of the need for awareness or the relevance for the firm, we have a virtual panel of the scouts who actually are out there to see the trends, and the R&D responsible people, and the product side, so the people who look more from the market. And they together make this judgment if these trends are the ones which we should watch, which then means for a firm it becomes manageable, because then they can start assigning responsible people to go after certain innovations here. So this is another way of making it then manageable, operational, and allowing you to also delegate some tasks within the firm. Now, what I want to come back now to, and then what I want you to kind of bring your trend analysis to, is two things here which you should try to do. First of all, I want you to identify larger trends which are of very high relevance to your own product business idea. Identify if these trends are hindering, supporting, whatever you want to do. And then go also down to concrete ideas what you want to do with that trend. So possibilities, what you can do with a trend is that it could be a kind of feature. It could be something which enhances your product. For instance, if you're Spotify, then you might feel that a recommendation engine is a great thing to add on. Or the Facebook interface could be something to add on, because you don't want to collect all the data from the people anew, but now they just connect with whatever data they already have in Facebook. You can also ask about the impact. So is it something which, for instance, will increase the market size? So if you think about any innovation in the healthcare business, for instance, actually if you go on the App Store of Apple and you look for health-related applications, you have quite an incredible amount of applications which concern ways to monitor yourself, either directly, so that you monitor your heart rate, for instance, over 24 hours, and then uploaded it, and through a certain system it gives you already some hints of what kind of illnesses you might have and how to improve your health, for instance. Or you just upload manually what kind of food you're eating, and then they tell you if that's good or not. Things like that could become more and more interesting, because we lack more and more the resources to take care of sick people, particularly when we talk about demographic change. So if you would be a group working on a business idea on a health-related product, you know that the trend of the aging population will make sure that you have very good growth prospects, that in the future that should have the impact of increasing the market size and your business potential. And you could also come to related product features or related products, so that if you find products which could enhance the ability to sell your own product or to service your client, that could be also something then to include and say, well, if for instance, that image recognition capability would be there when we come back to this example of me taking a picture of all of you and then already getting all your LinkedIn and Facebook profiles in response. If that image technology would advance to a level where this is possible, even sort of the faraway faces which I see at the far end of this room, then this would be something you want to watch, because that would be a key enabler for that business. So as a result of the next hour, I want you to have a presentation which has the mega trends, which gives you first of all overall feeling, and particularly from the point of view of an investor, you would look at that to see, well, do they have an idea why this innovation will be particularly interesting in the future? That is kind of the way many investors will think. They will look at you as a team and think, well, do they strike me as the bunch of people who will really pull it off, who will stay focused on it, even if they are hit by failures to start off with? Are they going to stay focused and keep after it? And then also, based on the mega trends, well, is it really something where I can see the message how this is going to be a big business in the future? So this could be the part of your elevator pitch later on, where you can say in a very short way why your product is so interesting. And in the second slide, and I would propose that you stay on 2 slides, you could then make either a mapping like this, or you just pick a couple of these trends and you tell us if that is product enhancement you can see out of that, or if it's something which is supporting you heavily, by giving concrete examples of the then so-called micro trends in our database. Some of you might have also seen that you can actually, when you see a micro trend in the database, there's a button where you can export that micro trend to PowerPoint, which will download a PowerPoint slide which has the image and the trend description. So you can also use that to maybe make a large slide with the pictures and the titles and so on to give a nice impression when later on you present. So overall, what you might be able to achieve out of that activity is have a convincing story on the abstract level, so saying the market which we're targeting is very interesting because of these megatrends, and on a concrete level. So our product will utilize these microtrends or will utilize these kind of capabilities which make it then a winning product.